want to mention that we both work with clients together in different ways. But what I've personally noticed is that when we both work together with a client, they do much better. I don't know if you've noticed that. But something that arose with a client, that was it. It was around candida. So I wanted to know, because the gut mind is something that is in shadow work. It's often ignored. It's overruled. It's people try to think their way to controlling things, which is why they end up on like I don't know, Weight Watchers and stuff like that, because they think, oh well, but it doesn't work. There's other elements within their being, like we talked about a little bit earlier about the self-soothing and stuff that arise. But I would like to understand a little bit more about candida. So maybe we talk about like some of the herbs that would support that changing. So what, because I don't understand the difference between. I know that the gut biome is stuff that affects the external skin and everything, isn't there? So what sort of things do you notice in people that have got these gut biome problems, and then how does that affect their skin, and what maybe some of the emotional problems that you notice in that as well, because that would support me in.
Well, we all have it. We all have candida, which is a yeast, which is a very simple biological life form. You could sort of say, is it a life form or not? It doesn't have a sort of a cell nucleus. It survives by fermentation of sugar.
Right,
so it's a yeast. So if the diet is excessively high in sugar, then the likelihood is that your gut microbiome is going to be skewed in favour of these more yeast or candida type yeasts or bacteria. And the problem with that is everybody has it, but there are lots of different types of candida. So the candida that you would think of when you think of oral thrush or vaginal thrush would be Candida albicans. But actually there are many different types of candida. So for example, there's Candida nigrans, there's Candida albicans, and there are many more. If the diet is fundamentally skewed to sugar, then there could be an overgrowth of these types of yeasts. Similarly, if you have had poor health or you've had a lot of antibiotics, let's say, then the gut microbiome again could be skewed to these type of yeasts. The problem with these types of yeast is they can go systemic, which means they can enter the body and cause problems not just within the gut. They can cause guts in the mucous membranes, as we know, in the oral cavity, in the vaginal cavity, and they can cause huge amounts of problems. Probably the main issue would be leaky gut, or what we call gut permeability. Now, yeasts have, you've got to imagine they're like little roots. They're called hyphae, and they kind of burrow into the lining of the gut. And the lining of the gut, in some places, is only one cell thick, very specialised cells. And these cells have little fingers. They look like that, and they're called villi. And the Candida albicans, nigrans, and other types of yeast basically root into these cells, therefore causing gut permeability in certain
which
areas.
Which is what starts causing the leaky gut, right?
Yes. And so that's really important, because the body so the gut cells, those little, they're called enterocytes, but it doesn't matter. Think of them as little finger-like projections. They allow certain things through the gut membrane, and these are very selective. So they would be things like micronutrients, certain amino acids from proteins, certain sugars, and essential fats or fatty acids. Anything else that sort of leaked through the immune system. So the way I like to think of the immune system is it's your internal army. is going to attack it because it knows self or other. So let's just imagine that through that semi-permeable membrane there's been a little bit of a leak, and let's say a fragment of feces comes through, and that might contain bacterial fragments, it could contain yeast particles, whatever it is, the body is going to create.
It's got to try to contain it, and it's got to get it out of the body.
It's going to attack
but via a different route than through the gut, so it's ended up in the bloodstream, etc. Exactly. Interesting. So I can see how. So that is going to trigger. So when that takes place, because what we see in our clients is we see fatigue, we see low immunity, we see. I tend to see people with disparities with their breathing, so all that is going to be affected by this candida as well. And obviously that and that can be reversed, but as we know, it's all the corporations and all the companies want to sell these modified processed foods that create these addictions. So it's a complex thing. It's not as simple as, because you and I both know we can say to people, can you just everybody stop drinking sugar, everybody stop eating sugar, but then
it's very hard.
But then it's exactly, and then all the other stuff comes up. How can I stop eating sugar, and what has my food got in it? Because a lot of people are unaware of all those processed sugars. So and we know, I think most of the people watching are probably quite aware of like white sugars and food with sugars in it and stuff, but some of the other would candida be affected as well by like processed like white flour, those sorts of things as well?
Absolutely.
So it's good to be aware of that, I think, because a lot of people kind of think sugar, they go, well, I'm not eating the sugar, I don't eat sweets, don't eat ice cream. We go, well, hold on a minute, we've got to consider where you're getting your carbohydrate from, like all your carbohydrate.
Absolutely. So when I say to people about sugar, they immediately think of table sugar. And they'll say, oh, well, I don't have sugar in my tea. But actually there are hidden sugars in so many processed foods. But apart from that, carbohydrates, as soon as you ingest them, so as soon as you start chewing a carbohydrate such as bread, pasta, rice, starchy vegetables, the body actually turns that into simple sugars. So glucose, fructose, excuse the phone.
And we're back. Sugars.
So the body will turn those carbohydrates into simple sugars. So even if you're not eating highly processed, obvious sugars like sweets, cakes, biscuits, soda, the standard Western diet probably contains around 300 grams of sugar a day. And that may be not in the form of table sugar, but in normal. It's quite interesting that one slice of bread, doesn't matter if it's wholemeal or white, so one slice of bread contains about 4 teaspoons of sugar.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I think like people when you refer people to me, when we're working together with people, what I find is that there can be, and I don't know if you experience it, and this is going to be more like sort of the shadow side of it and the ego side of it, but there can be a lot of denial. So like, well, actually, because what can happen is, it's really interesting, because I feel like the gut has this mind to itself as well, and like you said before, when you're talking about the candida, it's an organism. And it is an organism, like, we are like, what are we like, 60% bacteria or something? Or
they outnumber our gut bacteria.
There's more bacteria than there is human being, right?
Human cells,
that's
10
right,
to 1.
So like that, if we've not got the right bacteria, then that bacteria will be sending us messages to continue consuming the stuff that's, so like, and so there will be drivers, and this is where like it gets a little bit more complicated or complex when you're considering like dopamine responses to different things that are being eaten, but having that conscious awareness, becoming more aware of what's being eaten and the patterns, allows for that to change. And you know, and my experience with the dieting was, I tried and changed loads of different diets before I realised actually I was emotional eating. You know, I was eating to change my emotions, and so then and I've noticed the same things with other people, is that they've got all this willpower, but like, if you're filling yourself up in your hole because there's a lack of love, that's what you know, or self-love, that's what you've got to find first. And I think that's where it gets a little bit more complex again.
And then it skews it, because you've created an environment where there's an overgrowth of these yeasts.
Yeah.
Now remember, they can only ferment sugar.
Yeah.
So even if you have all the willpower in the world, if your gut bacteria is telling you,
eat that stuff, feed me with that stuff,
and it's often, it might not even be you that's craving, it's your gut microbiome, and that's when it's, I call it carb crack, and it is that addictive. It's when you have to have something sweet, and if people don't agree that sugar is addictive, I would say to you, give it up for 3 weeks, and you'll see how addictive it is.
But what can happen is, it's really interesting, because what I see with clients is they can move from one addiction to another.
Oh yeah.
So it can be social media flipping, it can be relationships, it can be sex addiction, it can be pornography, it can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be really simple things like just the way that they shop in a certain way, or rituals to just shift the addiction. So you've got to get to the root of the addiction, and you have to be addressing this on a metabolic level. So on the candida, because I remember you mentioning to me about a herb that helped, and again, your expertise on this, a herb that can help people so that they don't have the same sort of triggers around the sugar. So they can have something, because they have a herb, don't they? And what's that?
So it's a really interesting herb, and it really works. It's called Gymnema sylvestra, and it changes the taste buds of the tongue, so that when you consume sugar, it just doesn't taste the same. It doesn't give you that sugar hit. So it really deters the taste of sugar, but it's also used in herbal medicine to help keep the blood sugar more balanced, so you're not having these peaks and troughs, so that therefore you don't have that complete nosedive of sugar where you need to sort of refuel your addiction. But it's incredibly effective. And I've had a particular client that I remember who, when she wanted to binge on sugar, she wouldn't take her herbal medicine because she knew, because she knew it wouldn't give her that same feeling, because she wouldn't enjoy the sweet stuff as much. So it's incredibly powerful.
And that's where the emotional side comes in really strongly, because there's something within you must feel no matter what. And where the self-nurture must come in, and where having a practice of movement or meditation allows us to move, and having accountability, because we both know that we have clients who need us for the accountability when they're in those early stages.
And I think with food, I mean, you need to eat.
You've got to eat. You can't just go cold turkey or not eating. So
it's really difficult, and of course the emotional aspect of, oh, I had a bad day, I need a treat. Oh, it's a celebration, there's cake. Or, I've had a bad day, there's cake. You know, there's so many excuses. And social cues about sugar and sugary treats.
The donuts in the office are the bane, right? Like, I don't know if you, but I think most of my clients that are in offices, or in working environments like that, someone will bring in on Friday big box of sweets, big box of donuts, and then it becomes, except there's like a layering. So this is like more on a psychosocial perspective, but like if if not everybody's on board and you become the only person not doing it, it gets really difficult. Because
it's like if you decide to not drink alcohol.
Oh yeah, well, we know that. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, go on, just one.
Yeah, just one. You'll be fine. Have one. Go on, have one. And it gets stronger, though, doesn't it? And I think that, and the same thing happens around sugar, and around cake, and around food, because and as well, there's a trigger in there, and it needs compassion from both sides, because you're trying to do something better. You know, these people you're trying to do something better for yourself, trying to change your diet. But those other people are also, there's a part within their being which is going, oh my goodness, if you're doing it, that means I've got to do it. But I rely on this cake so that I don't feel so awful in the morning, or in the evening. How am I going to de-stress when I get home on a Friday night if I can't have my takeaway? For example, a Chinese takeaway, which is that used to be my go-to, right? That was like, full of sugar. It's like, you have sweet and sour, sugar. I don't even want to know actually how many litres of sugar there must be in that.
For me it was sweet cakes. I was real. It was only actually when I gave up sugar completely. I'd given it up for about 6 months, like completely, no carbs, all very low carb. That I realised, or I had memories coming back about incidences where I'd stolen biscuits or cakes, penguin biscuits, and I don't know if people remember the penguin biscuits, but you used to get like an 8-pack of them, and I remember I used to have them in my packed lunch, and I remember stealing one from the kitchen, the whole pack, and I ate them all. And then I hid the packets, hid the evidence, because I wanted to pretend that we didn't buy them. But of course,
I used to have these rituals, right? We're going to go into this now. So I used to have these rituals around food. I don't know if you had, because that sounds quite, because you go away to your bedroom.
Yeah, eat.
I'd have a ritual where I would, and like I remember having, and again, this is around sugar, because this is, and it's not overtly sugar, but like I would have like white rolls. So I'd have a white roll with a cheese slice with a ham slice, and I'll make that, right? And then I'd have like 3 bags of Watsits, right? Okay, and then I'd sit on my own, watch cartoons, and then that's what I'd eat. And that was me coming home from school, and I had problems at school. I was bullied, but I would come home from school, and that would be my way of decompressing. I didn't know at the time, obviously don't know until you look retrospectively all the shit that's going on, or stuff that's going on. Amazing. So like these, we have these rituals, and they persist though, don't they? So like when I speak to clients, I notice that as you begin to unpick the patterns and cycles, you can see where this stuff begins, and it begins. It's amazing, because some of this distraction begins. It doesn't begin with food or sugar. It just ends up being like that way because we're given sugar, we're treated sugar, we're silenced with sugar, etc. But sometimes it begins like with a blanket or thumb sucking, just to distract from a very strong emotion in the moment. And this is how this is complex, because we started with candida and we've ended up with, was it thumb sucking or a blanket, haven't we? Which is really interesting.
But I mean, sugar, I would say, is the first addiction. I would say
chemical substance.
Oh yeah. The more I've researched into food addiction, and particularly sugar, you realise that it does light up the same parts of the brain as cocaine. It does give you a huge dopamine hit. And it is, in my view, the first addiction for many people. And when you talk about progression of addiction, it'll start with sugar, and then perhaps it might go to alcohol, social drinking, maybe it will turn into other addictions like shopping, smoking. But it seems to be, for me, that
and the root is this dopamine.
Yes,
is accessing dopamine, and that can be had through having a balanced life, exercising, finding other ways to connect with people that doesn't involve going into a space where you're going to be triggered into an addictive pattern as well. Lovely. I enjoyed dropping into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Look out for our next video.
Yeah, look out for our next video.